Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Elden Ring Lore Explained. In the last episode, we talked about the Age of Stone, as I call it, which is just the pre-Erdtree part of the timeline. We don't know too terribly much about it, so most of the video was very rampant speculation and just kind of rambling about things that we don't have a ton of information on. This one should be much more coherent because we actually have a pretty decent amount of information on this part of the timeline. We have the same people here as last time because this is the same recording session. These first 5 episodes are all going to be recorded at pretty much the same time. Yeah. Now, the age of the Erdtree, as we would assume, begins with the emergence of the Erdtree. It's not really clear when or why this happens. The Erdtree seems to be very closely linked to something referred to as the Primordial Crucible. I'm pretty sure the Primordial Crucible is even referred to as, like, the original form of the Erdtree. What it effectively is just kind of the beginning of all current life as we know it. It's like the Cambrian explosion or something. Apparently, during the Primordial Crucible, all life was just kind of a mishmash together of various different features. Probably, like, all creatures just sort of looked the same. They all just had a bunch of different shit going on. They had wings, tails, horns, fur, scales, all that good stuff. I assume most life looked like the Misbegotten. They probably looked a lot like those, or they looked like the Omen, which is important. We'll get into that at some point. I don't know if we'll get into it during this video, but definitely one in the future because the Omen are a topic I'm quite interested in. And over time, living things started to diversify, and these features started being spread out among different living things. And the living creatures of the world eventually started evolving and gaining sentience, and it seems like the first race that we're aware of that became sentient and civilized was the Beastmen. Presumably, they created the city of Farum Azula. That's probably one of the first cities that existed. The dragons were still a thing, but they were no longer the dominant force over the world. It seems more like the Erdtree was that, but they were still there. I guess they were still the most powerful group of creatures in the world, but they weren't exactly ruling it anymore.
How does a tree overpower dragons?
Good question. It seems like the Erdtree has some kind of will, which is presumably the greater will. I think the greater will exerts itself through the Erdtree. It chooses to give grace to people, and maybe chooses to take it away, but it seems like also, like, Marika can do that.
I think it is. It can choose to give and take, seeing how, like, aren't the Tarnished previously people without any grace, but then after the Shattering, we're given grace once more.
Yeah. And considering Marika wanted to destroy the Elden Ring, it's probably safe to assume it was the Greater Will and the Erdtree doing that and not Marika.
Yeah.
So that's a thing that happens. I guess the ancient dragons hung out with the Beastmen when they were doing their thing, because they're still doing that in the present in Farum Azula, which is in the sky for some reason. Maybe the dragons helped out with that. I don't really know why Farum Azula is in the sky somewhere. I don't know, maybe one of you can look into that.
It's safe from all the tree roots or something. There.
There you go.
And the scarlet rope and whatnot.
Perfect sense. I don't know. Now, at some point after this, after millions of years or whatever, evolution happens, people are becoming a thing. A group of beings referred to as the Numen arrive in the lands between. Now, I'm pretty sure one of the starting backgrounds in the game refers to you, like, being... You are a Numen, or you're descended from the Numen? I think it would make more sense for you to be descended from the Numen, because it sounds like the Numen are basically gods. As far as I understand, at least.
I think they're just one of the older races. It could be gods.
Well, because it said that the new men are they're rare. Very few of them are born. They're not very common, and they came from space pretty much.
As with most things.
As with most of the things in this universe, they came from space. And one of these new men was Marika. Now, Marika is an Emperian, basically a god, like an actual, a living physical god. It seems like the Emperians' bodies are not so much flesh as they are almost sort of like a rock or clay-like substance. But that's not entirely clear. Because Marika's crumbling, but that may just be because she's host to the Elden Ring. We don't really get to see Mikola that much. It doesn't really look like it's happening to Mikola from what little we see of them. Malenia is kind of crumbling, but that seems to be more biological. Like actually, like her body's just rotting away rather than it crumbling like stone.
Yeah, that probably is more because they they're like the host for the
Scarlet
Rot God, so
and
that's probably just
Ronnie,
the result of that.
when we meet her, is possessing a doll, and that's crumbling a bit, but it's a doll. So yeah, I guess Marika's weird physiology has more so to do with her being host to the Elden Ring than just being an Emperian. Though, I guess an Emperian ascends to the state Marika's in, where she can be host to the Elden Ring, because Malenia, Mikola, and Ronnie were all Emperians, but there were more steps involved to them replacing Marika beyond just being Emperians. So, at some point, for some reason, probably because the Greater Will said so or something, Marika ends up becoming host to the Elden Ring.
The champion.
Yeah, the champion of the Elden Ring and the Greater Will. And there are a few things involved in this. It seems like there are two other factors required for someone being host of the Elden Ring. They need to have a consort, basically someone they have a pact with an oath, someone they're basically married to, who has some sort of say in how the power works in some way. It's not entirely clear what the Elden Lord does, but it seems like they are someone who can use the host's power. It doesn't seem like the host has a ton of say in how things work, but it seems more like just current Marika doesn't. Because in the past, Marika was doing a whole bunch of different shit. Marika was exerting her will over a whole bunch of things, and then she stopped doing that. I think that may be because of the Greater Will, but we'll get into that shortly. So she ends up picking Godfrey, the Golden, as her consort, who becomes the first Elden Lord in the Age of the Erdtree, because Placiduous Axe precedes him. Now, I think it's implied that he was actually called Horalu before becoming Marika's consort, and then when he became her consort, he took up the name Godfrey the Golden.
I think that was afterwards.
Well,
It's a little bit.
I need to check his remembrance again, because it sounds like he was originally Horalu, then he became Godfrey, and then when he was banished, he went back to being Horalu.
Why was he banished? What did he do?
Good question, actually.
Yeah.
I'll get into that shortly. Let's see here. Becoming a simple warrior once more. So maybe his name was Godfrey already? Maybe? And he was already a warrior.
Orlu.
Yeah, maybe it's not really clear if Horalu was a name that he took up. Like, he just picked it after he became tarnished and left. Or if that was his name originally and he just took it back up after becoming a simple warrior once again.
Yeah.
The other important thing for the host of the Elden Ring, for an Emperian, is to have a shadow-bound beast, who is their shadow, basically. It's like their servant. And for Marika, this was Malekith, the Black Blade, the coolest guy in the whole game.
Yeah.
And his job was to safeguard the Rune of Death, pretty much. It's not clear if that was the job given to him upon his creation, because he's apparently Marika's half-brother. Don't really know how that worked. Someone was getting a little freaky up in
I think
Marika's parents.
isn't there more of their shadow, right? I think that's the way it's described.
Well, he's also described as her half-brother, so...
Yeah.
What is this Rune of Death?
The Rune of Death. I'm glad you asked that. The Rune of Death is basically one of the Great Runes. It's a part of the Elden Ring. And the Elden Ring is the thing that establishes the Golden Order, which is basically the rules of the universe. You know, the rules of physics, whatever. It decides how the world works. And the Rune of Death, also referred to as Destined Death, asserts the rule that all things eventually die at some point. And Marika didn't like that. She kind of wanted to live forever and have a family and a kingdom that would exist forever, so she just kind of removed the Rune of Death and then gave it to Malekith and then maybe told him to kind of fuck off. Because his remembrance says that she betrayed him in some way, that he was intended to be safeguard to the Rune of Death, but even then Marika betrayed him. So perhaps he was the one who was supposed to make sure that the Rune of Death was not tampered with at all, and then she just removed it anyway, and then was just like, here, fuck off, go watch over this somewhere so that no one bothers with it. So this resulted in Marika having an eternal kingdom. She would never die, the Erdtree would never die, the demigods would never die. It's the reason why most of the things in the Lands Between are effectively immortal. Like, I guess that's the explanation for why a lot of the enemies come back, is because they're immortal.
Yeah.
It's part of why you come back, I guess, as a Tarnished, is because the Rune of Death is not a thing that applies to you, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, the Age of the Erdtree was not something that was, like, fully established. The absolute rule of Marika's kingdom and the Erdtree was not fully asserted immediately, because there were various other forces within the Lands Between that were not really cool with that. Either beings that predated the Erdtree, like the dragons, or beings that worshipped something other than the Erdtree and the Greater Will, those being the giants and the Flame of Ruin, which seems to come from an outer god as well, and is apparently anathema to the Erdtree. So, just big speculation here. I guess there are various conflicts going on between the outer gods, and the Flame of Ruin is something that comes from one that does not like the Greater Will.
Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, who would have thought? So there end up being, like, multiple different wars going on at the same time as they're trying to establish this Age of the Erdtree and the absolute rulership of Marika. The ancient dragon Grandsax attacks Leyndell. That is the giant fuck-off dragon that you see in Leyndell that's dead. This starts the war against the dragons, and it's the only time that anything had ever breached the inner walls of the capital, because it's just fucking giant. Like, what are you going to do about it?
I went over them because wings.
And, it's safe to assume, I think it's actually stated, that Grandsax was killed by one of the children of Marika and Godfrey, this being Godwyn the Golden, who, as far as we can tell, was a big dragon-slaying badass. This was the guy pretty much leading the war against the dragons. I would say there were basically 3 different big conflicts going on during the Age of the Erdtree, or at least the early parts of it, and these were all being led by 3 different people. So we had Godwyn leading the war against the ancient dragons. We had Godfrey presumably leading the war against the giants, because he just kind of seems like the guy that'd be doing that. That seems to kind of be where he would fit into the picture. And then we had another war going on against the Carian royal family and Raya Lucaria, which were sorcerers who studied the stars and didn't really like the Erdtree that much because it seemed like the Erdtree coming into existence and, the Golden Order kind of messed up the cosmos a little bit and messed up their glintstone sorcery and astrology, so they were not really happy about that. And the war against them was led by someone named Radigan, who was a descendant of the giants. It's not really clear how that worked exactly. I guess you could say he's not necessarily half giant, but, just descends from them. He has the same fiery red hair that the fire giants have, but he did not like that. Self-hating giant descendant, not a big fan of his features. And he was in conflict with the leader of the Carian royal family in Raya Lucaria, who was Renala, the full moon queen. And it seemed like there were multiple big wars against them, like there were multiple campaigns. And the second one was the one that resulted in Radigan and Renala getting married to put an end to the conflict and created something of a truce between the Kingdom of the Erdtree and the Carian royal family. So they were no longer warring against each other. I guess Radigan found Renala's super badass battle sorcery to be very attractive. Can't blame him.
One thing I did have during when I was Leoria, it feels like the battle there did kind of level the entire place and just turn it into a giant lake. So probably, but that's just speculation.
Probably, yeah.
The place is in ruins.
Yeah. So that's the end of that war. Godwyn pretty much ends the war against the ancient dragons. He ends up befriending the dragon Fortisax. I guess they fought each other and realized they were both really cool. And I'm guessing Godfrey was probably the one who ended the war against the giants. And basically, there were barely any giants left. The giants pretty much got genocided. When Marika learned that the Flame of Ruin was pretty much everlasting, it would never end, it would just be there forever, she cursed presumably the last of the fire giants to watch over it forever. And this is the fire giant that we encounter before the Forge of the Giants, who I fucking despise.
That guy, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. So, Marika's kind of a real bitch. It's just like, oh, your weird fire god thing will last forever? Okay, then you can just stand around it forever, I guess. She seems to have a thing for cursing people, which we're gonna get into right now.
And if you have crazy magic capable of doing that, why are you letting it go waste?
But yeah,
Right,
why wouldn't
exactly.
you use your ability to curse people?
This is true. So, after the last of Godfrey's worthy opponents had been felled, it's said that the light in his eyes disappeared. And I think this has a twofold meaning. The first meaning is that Godfrey didn't have anyone super cool and strong to fight anymore. He had run out of worthy opponents, and as such he just became bored and disillusioned, typical thing to happen with these types of characters, literally every single time. The other meaning to this is that he became stripped of grace. He was no longer given grace and light from the Erdtree. Because this is how the Tarnished are described as well. They do not have the glow of grace within their eyes. And the reason for this is not entirely clear. Well, we know how it happened, but we don't know why. Marika decided to banish Godfrey and his followers from the lands between. You could say perhaps that it's because they had fulfilled their usefulness, and she didn't really have any need for them anymore. The purpose of taking Godfrey as her consort was just for the sake of dealing with the giants and the other threats that were opposing her rule. And then when that was taken care of, she didn't have any need for him anymore, especially if he was just going to become like this dejected, useless old man. Then she didn't want anything to do with him anymore, so she was just like, get out, go live with your parents or something, get the fuck out. Yeah. They got divorced. They had a big glowing divine god divorce, and Marika got to keep the house and the big god tree, and Godfrey had to leave.
And literally everything.
Yeah, literally kept everything and told Godfrey to fuck off. Alternatively, it could have something to do with Radigan and Renala, because Godfrey leaves, Godfrey and his followers leave, they go out on something called the Long March, in which they trudge their way out of the lands between and fight their way out of this place and across the world to just kind of end up in other places. And they're now tarnished. This is the origin of the tarnished, the beings who are denied the grace of the Erdtree.
For now.
For now.
For now.
Until things get desperate. Until things get really bad and we have to resort to desperate measures.
They're like, oh, fine, we'll go get them.
Yeah, oh, fuck, none of the grace-given people are useful? Shit. Alright, yeah, I should mention that Godwyn was not the only child that Marika and Godfrey had. The children born of them, this specific line of demigods is referred to as the Golden Lineage. In addition to Godwyn, we have Morgott and Mog, who are both omens, which we'll talk more about later, but, you know, not exactly popular like Godwyn, for various reasons. And then they have various other unknown descendants. We know that there are demigods beyond the ones that we hear about, because the walking mausoleums have dead demigods in them. That's what they bury them in. You find that out from a ghost hanging out near one of the churches in the Weeping Peninsula. And we know a couple members from the Golden Lineage that are not the direct offspring of Marika and Godfrey. There is a Phase 1 reskin of Godric in the Golden Lineage Evergaol in the Altus Plateau referred to as Godfrey the Grafted, who exists
Most
for some
important
reason, I
character.
guess. Yeah. And then our guy, presumably the first shard bearer you fight in the game, Godric the Grafted, who is explicitly stated by several characters to be a runt of the litter guy who is, like, barely related to Godfrey. Very far
He's the
descendant,
second
barely
cousin
has any
of-
of his demigod power.
I'm 1/16.
Yeah, the way I described it is basically, Godric is one of those guys who takes like a 23andMe test, finds out he's 1/16th Native American, and then starts going around saying, yeah, I'm part Cherokee.
Seems about right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Godfrey leaves. The members of the Golden Lineage are still there. They're still part of things. Godric is actually a part of, like, the royal court. He has a seat in the audience hall in Lanedale. So he's not a complete loser. It seems more like he's probably there for obligation than anything else. It's just like, yeah, he's here, I guess.
You're
It's
not
interesting.
dead.
It's interesting Godwyn didn't have a seat there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because Godwyn was slain, so they
As
removed his
Well,
seat.
Godric,
I think that like audience hall was there before the shattering, obviously, and I think if they were going to have a seat for anyone in the Golden Lineage, they would just have Godwyn and not Godric, that one barely demigod asshole who has tied a bunch of people's body parts onto himself.
Because he just really wanted to rule people with fear.
It's true. So Godfrey leaves, and then Marika's like, I need a new consort. Radigan, you're an interesting guy. Become my new consort. So Radigan, at like the literal drop of a hat, leaves his cool magic wife to go fuck a goddess and become the second Elden Lord. Radigan's kind of an asshole as far as we can tell. He's kind of a dick. Though he does leave this egg thing with Renala that we can use for respecking our character and changing our appearance. It's used for rebirth. I think something with this may have to do with why Marika wanted Radigan as her new consort. Because the two children of Marika that are also Emperians are the children that she has with Radigan. I think it may have something to do with that. Because we know Ronnie is the daughter of Radigan and Renala, and she is an Emperian. But the strange thing is that an Emperian can supposedly only be born of a single god. You can't have a god reproduce with a non-god and produce an Emperian. It almost sounds like they can only produce them like asexually, which is theoretically possible based on the fact that we see Marika merge with Radigan. I mean, we don't see it happen, but it happened at some point. And I'm assuming it happened during the Age of the Erdtree. This was not a recent thing that happened, because the statue in Lanedell tells us Radigan is Marika. This was a secret that a sculptor found out when he was commissioned to make a statue of Radigan before the Shattering happened. So this was something that happened a decent amount of time in the past. I guess their union, their oath or whatever, involved Radigan merging with Marika. And Radigan, being kind of a power-hungry asshole, was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't give a shit. I still retain some level of self-awareness, and I'm able to control the body sometimes when I want to. Sure thing. Fine by me. I got no problem with that. Now, the Egg of Rebirth thing, I have heard the theory that the reason Ronnie is an Emperian was because of the use of this egg. That Ronnie was able to be reborn as an Emperian from it. And it was because of that Marika was interested in Radigan. It's not entirely sure how this happened, but, that's the best theory I've heard. Now, Radigan and Renala had two other children that we're aware of other than Ronnie, being Radahn and Rykard. When Radigan went and became consort to Marika, Ronnie, Radahn, and Rykard all became stepchildren demigods. So they weren't technically demigods already, depending on what Radigan and Renala are. We know Renala's not a demigod. So then they were just kind of honorary demigods. They were certainly seemingly strong enough to deserve it, I guess.
Yep.
They were warriors.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, Rykard had a big sword even before he got turned into a gross snake monster. So, yeah, I guess he was already a warrior, and Ronnie was a witch.
Wasn't saying fucking manner in a...
And Radahn. Whoa.
Yeah, and Radahn
Radahn
was explicitly a huge badass, so...
Radahn.
Yeah, Radahn, very cool guy. So they become stepchildren to Marika, and as such are basically kind of like honorary demigods. Once again, depending on what exactly Radigan is. So Radigan becomes consort to Marika, and then merges with her. They are now two beings inhabiting the same body. They're able to take over and shapeshift into whoever's in control at the time. And I'm assuming that this had something to do with the greater will. Because we know that a consort is necessary for an Emperian. They have to have one if they're to be the host to the Elden Ring. So I imagine what happened was Marika just decided, yeah, I'm not really interested in having Godfrey around anymore. Get out. I have to find a new consort, I guess. Okay. And the greater will was like, oh, fuck. Please don't be doing this every week. We can't have you doing this shit all the time. This is just going to be too annoying to deal with. So when Marika gets her next consort, we're just gonna merge them together so she can't just kick him out of the house like the last one. So then all this logistical stuff, I don't have to worry about it again. These are the deep, eldritch thoughts of the Greater Will. And after Radigan and Marika get together, literally, they have 2 children that we're aware of. It's not really clear what the deal with Melina is. It seems like Marika is her mother. That seems very heavily implied. It's not entirely clear how that works, because then I think Melina may also be an Emperian.
Yeah, because don't Ronnie and Melina have the same, like, mark under their eye?
Yeah, though that's not required for an Emperian, but that is an interesting thing. So I think that may...
People are theorizing that they might be connected in one way, and they're trying to figure out if that answer could be found through, like, maybe another potential ending where, like, Melina lives and you get them to meet Ronnie.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
we're still... At the point of recording this, we do not think we have found all the endings yet. There are allegedly 10. I think we are aware of, like, 7.
There are 6 confirmed. A 7th is known and under investigation, and that's all that I know about.
Fascinating.
Yeah, very fascinating. So
that's a topic for a different video.
But the 2 confirmed children that Marika and Radigan have are Miquella and Melania, who are twins. Both of them are Emperians. This is possible because Radigan and Marika are the same person now, so they're one god. Whatever. And as a result, when they produce a child, that child is an Emperian as well. So that's why Miquella and Melania are Emperians. Though both of them were cursed. Like, when they were born cursed. But they weren't born cursed like Morgott and Moog. They weren't omens. Instead, Miquella was cursed to forever be a child, and Melania was cursed to be host to the Scarlet Rot. She was born with a rot inside of her, which is probably due to the interference of whatever outer god is stuck underneath the Lake of Rot. It's not entirely clear how this was done, but it happened, and this is presumably kind of a bad omen for things to come, and may have been the reason, in part, why Ronnie didn't want anything to do with being an Emperian, because it kind of seemed like Ronnie was the one being set up most out of the 3 to take over Marika's position, and that she had the least problems going on. Like, as far as we're aware, she did not have any curse or anything wrong with her, like Miquella and Melania did. So she was the one being chosen to eventually inherit Marika's role as host to the Elden Ring. But given that Marika seemed to have some kind of loss of independence, seems like, you know, if she was really forced to merge with Radigan by the Greater Will, being host to the Elden Ring is not great. It's not very good, not particularly enjoyable. Her children, as like a merged god, were both cursed and fucked up. So I'm figuring that was probably a big part in why Ronnie didn't want anything to do with being an Emperian and replacing Marika, and why she ended up conspiring with the Black Knife Assassins to do some not good things, to steal the Rune of Death and kill some demigods. But
either Ronnie hired them or got them, or she literally made the Black Knights.
Yeah. That is well, I subscribe to one of those theories more than the other, but we'll get into that in the next episode, because that's pretty much all for the Age of the Erdtree. I'm sure there are some other things, but I think that's kind of the general overview of the Age of the Erdtree. That's pretty much all of the big stuff that we're aware of with it. I know there's more information about the Carian royal family and Raya Lucaria, and some more stuff about the Giants, but that will all get its own separate video in the future, and I'm not versed in all of it yet, so we can't really talk about all of that stuff until I'm more familiar with it.
But next, got the previous age. All that led up to Elden Ring happening.
Indeed.
The Age of the Shattering.
Yeah, so we will be getting into that in the next episode, so if you're looking forward to that, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Be sure to leave a like and comment on this video to show your support, help boost us up in the algorithm. It's a big help. Until next time, I will see you guys around. Take care.
Bye.